Welcome to Soul-Led Creative Women, the podcast for heart-centered creative women who are ready to reclaim their spark and live with deeper meaning, authenticity, and soul. So today I have Jennie Lee with me. Jennie is an award-winning author, certified yoga therapist, and conscious creativity coach who has counseled private clients for over 26 years. Her spiritual focus and pragmatic tools help people reconnect to their soul's wisdom for joyful self-expression. Jennie also hosts yearly international retreats and is the founder and director of the Essere Writer and Artist Residence in Italy. So welcome, Jennie.
Thank you, Sam. It was a pleasure to meet you, and sounds like we are very aligned in the scope of our work. So looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, great. So let's just start with your story. Tell us about your journey and what's led you here today talking to me about creativity and spirituality.
Oh my goodness. Well, the journey has been long. I have spent many years, approximately 26 years, doing personal coaching in the realm of yoga therapy and with a very spiritual focus. So yoga therapy is a broad field, and some people focus more on the physical. I have always focused more on the psychospiritual end of people's experience. And so then that led me into writing 3 books on the topic of spiritual self-development and the yoga philosophies around that, and which then led me to creating a writers and artist residency program,
Mm-hmm.
which is my current focus, as well as the coaching work that I continue to do. But I really love supporting people in their evolution through their personal expression of their spiritual essence via their creative practice or process.
So, it's a beautiful intersection, right? Where spiritual wisdom, meets creative expansion. So tell us a bit about your thoughts on that intersection. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, it means everything to me, really, because I believe that we have incarnated to express something very unique and particular as souls, and that each soul has many gifts, that we are here to offer in service to the world. And that often comes through our creative process. Sometimes it comes in other ways as well, but as artists, as writers, as creators of any sort, the more that we can tap into that higher wisdom of intuition, soul wisdom, the more our work is informed, I think, at the highest level possible. And
Mhm.
it's where we have the satisfaction of doing what is most fulfilling to us
Mhm.
and most serviceable to the world at the same time. Um, to me, that's really the most important thing of bringing the spiritual and the creative together, is
Mhm.
that it really becomes that dharmic path
Mhm.
that we step onto, that is, like I said, it's the most fulfilling place for us and it's the most serviceful for the world. And when we can hit that sweet spot,
Mm.
it's just pure joy, right? So
Yeah,
it's
because they
great.
do feed each other, right? So as we
Yeah.
grow, our creative practices grow and vice versa. So I think it's really beautiful. I love that. So, creativity can mean many things to people, right? It can mean consciously creating a life with more purpose, meaning, and fulfillment, as you sort of alluded to there, at one end. And then it obviously also means that practical, hands-on creative expression, our creative practices that we actually physically do, like writing or art making, etc. So do you believe that both of those feed each other, and can we have one without the other? Can we create a life that we love if we're not creating physically with our hands or, our bodies?
Well, I think people create in all different ways, and I believe that everyone is creative, and it's really a matter of finding the expressions that are most meaningful to us. And so to answer your question, I would say, no, it would be hard to have the most meaningful, fulfilling life if we're not utilizing what is innate in us that wants to be expressed. And that can be as simple. I mean, it can come out in so many different ways, but it can be as simple as cultivating a small garden or cooking or, singing. It's not just words. It's not just our hands or our voices that express. I think language is incredibly creative, learning different languages. And for me, I like to experiment with lots of different forms of creativity, especially if I'm feeling a bit drained or blocked in one. I look for things that are really outside of my typical wheelhouse, not what I might do on a more professional level or that I do more often. I just look for things that are fun.
Yeah.
We don't have enough fun in our
Different.
lives, so anywhere we can weave that in.
Yeah, creative living. And it's
Mhm.
like, I sometimes say it's like the scenic route, choosing like the scenic route, for a task or for something that might be a bit more mundane. So yeah, beautiful. So tell
Yeah.
us a bit about your own creative journey then, and what practices have really sparked that creative expansion and spiritual growth within you.
Well, I've always been a writer. Ever since I was a little kid, I started out writing little stories about my animals. I'm an animal lover, so that was kind of my first foray into writing. And then I wrote poetry and screenplays and greeting cards and essays and personal profiles, and I went through a journalism degree, and then I did travel articles. And so, I mean, I've written all over the map, but then I sort of set it aside for a while. Life happened. I opened a yoga studio, started pursuing my yoga therapy path, and then I really started to see an opening in the world of yoga books. This is 15 years ago now, 10, 12, 15 years ago. Lost track of years. Um, but as a teacher, I was always looking to explain the deeper philosophies of yoga to my students in a way that they could comprehend and digest in an hour-long class. But I wanted them to walk away from a physical yoga class with something deeper. And so the philosophy books that I was reading as a teacher, I had time to do that. It was my passion to read that, but I knew that they would not. The average student would not have time for that. So I was looking for a book that would help me deliver the philosophical end of of yoga to my students, and I couldn't find it. So it
Okay.
sparked me into writing what I thought was an appropriate book on that topic, which was my first book called True Yoga. And it took 7 years to get published. Was not an easy journey, but it has been really well received and has been embraced in the very way that I had hoped that it would by both students and teachers of yoga who want to understand the concepts of yoga philosophy and implement them in their daily lives and make them really pragmatic. So I think as a writer, I've always been, I mean, like I said, I played with a lot of different forms, but as a writer teacher, it's more about communication. So I've been propelled by wanting to communicate a message that I either feel is needed in the world or that is really important to me. My second book, Breathing Love, is all about taking our meditation practice off the cushion and how we walk in the world and really living and breathing that love and peace that we're cultivating when we're on the meditation cushion. And that's just super important to me. I mean, that is what I try to live and breathe and embody. So
Sure.
I wanted to convey that. And then third book, Spark Change, is a book about our spiritual evolution via the questions, many of the questions that I worked with private clients on in my yoga therapy practice. And so the more that we do that self-inquiry, which is one of the foundational tools of yoga philosophy, self-inquiry is kind of the complement to meditation. The more that we are able to define like you were saying, what is that most meaningful and purposeful path for us? How do we want to express it? What creative form wants to move through us? And we open ourselves into those dimensions of more transcendent life experience that hopefully can translate into also pragmatic work.
Yeah.
Doesn't always pay the bills, but it feeds the soul.
It sounds like you're trying to make it more accessible, make these spiritual and creative, tools more accessible, because I feel like some of it feels a little bit unreachable. It certainly has historically, in terms of, it's only for the select few that are able to, channel or tune into this, immense, universal power. So would you agree with that? Is that your intention behind your work, to really make it practical and down to earth?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I am nothing if not practical, pragmatic, and all about the useful, usable little tools that people can carry forward. Because honestly, I was a single mom for 10 years. I know what it's like to own my own business, try to balance also parenting. And it's not easy. I mean, the stress levels that I see in the world today with my clients and friends and just all around us are super high. People are maxed out. They don't have a lot of time to go sit on a mountaintop and contemplate
No.
life. So I feel like anything that we're offering as teachers needs to be super pragmatic and able to do in a short period of time.
Yeah.
But, and I know we're going to get there talking about the artist residency that I founded. But the intention with that program, so it's called SRA Writers and Artist Residency. And my intention in creating that was to give people a time and a space where they could step out of the production cycle and step into the really being and listening space, much like we would do on a yoga retreat, which I've also led many of those over the years. But bringing
beautiful.
that sort of contemplative, quiet, receptive space to the creative.
Settling into the process rather than, focusing on the outcomes, I guess. So that's really beautiful. So before we get to the artist residency questions, what do you think blocks us from, authentically and honestly expressing our soul's truth, the stuff that wants to come through us, even when we want to do it? What blocks us from being really truthful and honest with ourselves and expressing that?
Well, so many things, but you said something key in there, which was being truthful and honest with ourselves. And I think that's one thing people don't always recognize, that they're not being completely truthful with themselves first. And that is where it needs to begin. And that's why a practice like meditation for me is absolutely critical, because it is the space in which I sit and observe my thoughts and recognize the things that are moving through, which could be potential blockers, right? So whether that's a voice of fear of how my work might be received, or the hesitation around extending myself vulnerably because it's competitive out there and there's lots of voices and, it's just, it feels too hard or scary or overwhelming. So I think what blocks us are the inner voices of judgment, that we're not good enough, what we have to say isn't valuable enough. There's too much competition, all the voices of either self-judgment, self-criticism, or self-sabotage in terms of just feeling too afraid to do it. And, as a creative, you have to grow a thick skin. As I had said, my first book, it took 7 years to get that published. I went through so many rejections. It was ridiculous. I mean, my agent even set it aside and just was like, this isn't going to sell. And then it just happened. We happened to get some interest from a publisher out of the blue many years after our initial pitches. But at that time, I had gotten so worn down and so discouraged that I almost didn't believe it was going to happen, or didn't, and I really had to rally my inner forces to say, okay, yeah, let's try again. Let's see what we can do with this and see if we can get a contract on it. And I'm really glad I did.
Yeah, sure.
Um,
Yeah.
but it takes a lot of resilience to keep coming
Mm.
back.
And a vulnerability, to sort of expose yourself like that and be rejected or
Yeah.
criticized. Yeah, really powerful. And I do think, just leaning into, that self-judgment piece and really being in our head, rather than our heart when we're creating. What I love to do is sort of, infuse some spiritual practices at the beginning of like a creative session, and make it more of a ritual so that you're actually sitting down and grounding yourself with written intention before you're asking for, creative flow to arrive and before you're asking for, that creative energy to appear and to deliver, what you want. Yeah, so really beautiful in terms of fusing the spiritual and the creative as part of your process.
Yeah. I mean, I think uh, having those rituals to invite the creative flow is important, but we also have to be aware of what our vessel is capable of, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if spirit can't flow through us if we're not really available to it
yeah.
and willing to take those risks and
Yes.
extend ourselves and be vulnerable and be that messenger, right?
Yeah, that's where
So,
play comes in, right? Like you have to
yeah.
include play as part of that process. Otherwise, you lose touch with all of that stuff that you just said,
Yeah.
that risk taking and that vulnerability,
I think including play is super important for our own well-being. I would say not taking ourselves too
Yeah.
seriously too is a
Yeah.
really important quality to develop. And that's where the yoga practices have helped me because
Mhm.
there's so much teaching around, recognizing the ego for what it is
Mhm.
and being able to set it aside and recognize ourselves as spiritual beings as well that
Yeah.
are so much more than the ego, and so much more than that human story. And being able to laugh at it and kind of not take it so seriously.
Yeah. And being open to the fact that we're continually evolving and growing, as it is our creativity as part of that, right? So
Yeah.
being gentle, and kind to ourselves as part of that process.
Gentle and kind. Two words that are dear to my heart because my son's name means gentle and kind. It's
Oh, does
Gaelic
it?
name.
Oh,
So
wow.
I chose for that reason because those qualities are very, very important to me and
That's
not
cool.
so evident in the world these days.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And it
yeah.
starts with us, right? We have to
Yeah.
practice it with ourselves. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool. So, why do you think that creative expression holds so much transformative power?
Well, because I do think that it's our souls in action,
Hmm.
right? So if we're if we're allowing ourselves to be those vessels for spirit to move through via our creative process, whatever that looks like,
Hmm.
um, we're getting closer to our spiritual nature because we're
Hmm.
in that what they would call co-creative
Yeah.
space with spirit. And the more that we don't do that and sort of eddy in our own little egoic kind of I'm in control of my life
Yeah.
space, I think is just not as evolutionary, certainly not as pleasant and not really where we're meant to be. So
No. So, moving into the artist residency, then, which I think is an amazing concept, love it. What inspired you to start running, a writer and artist residency in Tuscany?
yeah, well, I had as a writer, I'd been to several residencies
Hmm.
while I was working on different books, and many of them are created as there's so many different types. There are solitary ones, there are group ones, there are ones where a certain product is expected at the end from the participant. And as I said, I had run yoga and meditation retreats for many years. And then as a writer, I was going on these residencies and I saw, again, it's a marketplace thing, right? So I saw a space for something different that I
Hmm.
wasn't finding out there.
Hmm.
I wanted, as a writer, to go to a space that did have that kind of spiritual component, um, or at least a spiritual essence to it,
Mhm.
where I know as the facilitator now, I hold the view that we are all there as spiritual beings in our
Mhm.
highest creative process. So
Mhm.
whether we talk about spirituality or not is not really the important thing, because that's not always appropriate depending on the group that I have.
Sure.
Sometimes it comes up in conversation, sometimes it does not. But as an energy, that's how the
Mhm.
space is held. And it's a retreat like residency in the sense that it's the what I'm encouraging people to do is to take space for their process, for
Mhm.
that inner listening, to forget about the production cycle while they're there.
Sure.
Yes, many people are very productive, but it comes more organically. It's
Mhm.
not so much about come in with a project, get it done, hammer out a some certain number of pages every day. I mean, some people do that, and that's great. I
Yeah.
had a couple of painters from Australia, actually, beautiful ladies, who came to one residency, and honestly, before I'd even greeted the group, they were just, like, in the studio, setting up their easels and on
Mhm.
it. So, that's great. They were on fire, with passion for
Mhm.
their work, and
Mm.
they got a tremendous amount done. But then I've had people come in where they've really not gotten anything accomplished in terms
Sure.
of actual product to show as they walk out, but they've had a transformative experience because
Yeah,
they've
okay.
allowed themselves to rest and
Yeah.
be. And
Yeah.
the word essere means to be in
Yeah, I
Italian.
saw that.
So
I saw that, yeah.
that's the intent behind the program.
Yeah, so tell us a bit more about, what you hope, you know, the residency or the retreat, offers in terms of transformation, for creative and personal growth. What is your hope that someone would take away from an experience like that?
Couple things. I hope that they can step away from their daily lives and start to feel from an inside out kind of perspective what it is that their soul is really wanting to express at that time. Because I think as we get more into a professional life as a creative, we can kind of get swept along with the tide, and maybe something that has been successful just becomes generative, but then after a certain point, it's not really where our spirit is taking
Mm.
us.
Mm.
And it's hard to step away from it because it might be where our income source lies
Mhm.
or where the reputation lies, and we want to try something different. And that can feel really risky.
Mhm.
Almost riskier than for somebody just starting out who doesn't have a reputation
Sure.
built around a certain body of work. So, but I hope that people can just pause from
Mm.
wherever they are in their careers as creatives and listen internally, listen to what is wanting to be expressed.
Mm.
That's one thing. The second thing is that I hope that they can embrace being in a cross-cultural and um, international community that where when I curate a group, I'm curating not just based on professional work, but on the character and the general intent of why people are wanting to do a residency like this. And
Mhm.
I'm
Okay.
trying to bring together as diverse a group as possible because I really believe that we learn and grow through exposure to people who are different from ourselves.
Mhm.
And as creatives, we need that stimulation, and
Mhm.
we shouldn't just be having conversations with people who are writing or painting or singing in the same genres that we are.
Sure.
We can learn from those mentors, and part of the experience is also to have mentorship from professionals in different
Mhm.
disciplines. But there's so much to be said from the conversations that happen spontaneously at the dinner
Mhm.
table with people who come from just completely different backgrounds.
Sure.
Maybe they're different ages, different genders, different disciplines of work, but they're having a conversation about the creative process and suddenly they're sparking things for each other.
Yeah.
And so to embrace that and to take yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone,
Mhm.
I think is one of the benefits to
Mhm.
the the experience.
Yeah, sounds amazing. And it's that inspiration, inspiration feeds inspiration feeds inspiration, right? So So cool. Love it. So for all the women out there who are curious about more authentically and creatively expressing their soul's truth, what powerful message or question would you like to leave them with today?
Well, I would say do something,
Mm.
anything, something small, something exploratory. Think of it as, think of taking one step as an exploration, as an experiment with don't limit yourself with big agendas or outcomes or expectations because that will inevitably shut you down at the beginning.
Mhm.
But if you think the creative process as a big experiment, like what would one fun step be today? And just do something because energy flows when we start to move it. And I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and she said, we just have to keep stirring the mud.
Yeah.
And eventually that lotus pops up, right? The something beautiful comes from the sludge. And I
Yeah.
mean, I've had plenty of times where I've just been feeling stuck in the mud, literally.
Mm,
Um, and not feeling particularly creative. But
mm,
I do know that if I just start moving in some direction, even if it, like I had said earlier, even if it's not within the discipline that I necessarily ultimately want to be working on, like my writing,
yeah.
I might go and try experimental cooking
Mm.
or sing a song, like belt out a song in Italian because I love singing and just speaking in Italian. But that feels creative to me in that moment, and it
Yeah.
kinda stirs the mud, right?
No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
do so any little thing.
So cool. So how can people get to know you better, Jenny, and get a real feel for the work that you're doing?
Well, my website is jennieleecoaching.com. Um, you can reach out, you can have a discovery call with me, we can chat about what you're working on and see how what I offer may or may not align for you. There's lots and lots of articles on my website that I've written, lots of podcasts on there as well.
Mhm.
So people can listen to some of the messages that I share around the creative process and spiritual living. Um, they can come you can apply and come to SRA or to a yoga retreat. I'm also running a yoga and meditation retreat in Tuscany, next September, so I have both next fall. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming and chatting with me today. Loved our conversation. Thank you.
Thank thank you, Sam.
Hey, Sam here. Thanks for listening to the end. If you love this episode, I would love to hear from you. Please send me a message on social media. You can find me on Instagram at Sam Horton Studio. For more episodes like this, please subscribe to my podcast, Soul-Led Creative Women, on your favourite platform. You'll find all the links at samhorton.co/podcast. The themes and tools explored in this episode feature in my new online program, Empowered Creative Soul. To find out more and join the waitlist for VIP perks when doors open, please visit samhorton.co. The direct link is in the show notes. Take care.